But it is a thrill to be back. I'm happy that, again, this team in particular spends time out of their day and their effort to continue to focus on doing the right thing. And as Alex already pointed out, I've been doing this for a long time. It seems like forever, and I don't know that every day I feel as rewarded as the day before. But the challenge continues because I do this because I have 5 grandchildren. And the efforts that I am trying to impose on a daily basis is no longer about me. And it's not even about my children, my 5 boys, or my 3 boys with 5 grandchildren. It's about my grandchildren, because what we are having to deal with today and what we're going to talk about today is really changing the behaviors that we grew up with. And while they define our prosperity and who we are as a culture and a world, they are in fact behaviors that will not sustain life if we are not more responsible for how we take care of the waste that we are created as a result of that prosperity. What is most important for everyone to understand, how many people have ever been outside the United States? Okay, pretty larger than normal. Because how many of you went outside of the normal vacation spot? I would contend that even those hands are not relative to the true culture of the rest of the world. Recognizing that 72% of the world average annual income is just 42 US dollars. 72% of the world's population's average annual income is just 42 American dollars. So the world does not live like we do, but yet their hope and prosperity for future looks very similar to what we have, and who we are and what we are, and how that needs to happen. And the truth is folks, we are in crisis because things in our world are not static. They are as dynamic in time as they have ever been in mankind's history. How many have ever heard, and I think I actually said this last time I was here, but from the time of creation, we're not going to go the religious piece, so we won't argue those issues. That's not important. From the time that man actually stood up, Homo erectus, to 1850, it took man that long to get from 2 to 1.5 billion persons. Okay, so we're talking literally 600,000 years to get to 1.5 billion. 1850 marks what? The birth of the second industrial revolution, the introduction of mechanized equipments, the steam engine, and other things to make man's prosperity and opportunity possible. So from 1850 and the advances of technology and industry, we went from 1.5 billion to 7.4 to 7.6 billion in just a little bit over 100 years. 1850, 1950, so 150 years, basically 150 years. In the next 40 years, we will go from 7.4 to possibly 9.6 to 10 billion people. The consequences of that are really significant because as things change in our environment, so too does the dynamics of what that really does mean for us. Because, as I just told you, from the time we started to whatever, we are going to have to produce more food on this planet in the next 40 years than man has in the last 10,000. So when 1 in 6 children go to bed hungry in America today, what does it look like in the rest of the world? When you see what prosperity means for us and how we change the dynamics of what we are going forward, what does that mean for us when we look at who we are and what we are? And that's kind of what we're working today. I do still believe And I was here a couple of years ago as a president of a sustainable energy company, really talking about energy reduction and the likes. But I'm focusing my attentions more now about the actual physical environment and why is it so much more important? Because there's so many things that we need to be conscious of and are not being very respectful of how our daily activity affects the rest of the world. So, a little bit about, I Live a Clean San Diego. We're the oldest nonprofit environmental company organization in Southern California. We are actually celebrating our 65th birthday this year. And we are 1 year older than Keep America Beautiful. So San Diego saw the need to be proactive. A year before, Washington saw a need to create an organization in DC. So we're very, very happy to be that part. In actuality, I Live a Clean San Diego does more in one day's event than the 12 largest cities in America does all year long. So our most significant event, and I'll kind of go through it a little bit later, we just completed, but we collected more trash in a 3-hour period in San Diego than the 12 major cities in the United States collected over the course of an entire year because of our efforts and holding the number of sites and the things that we did. So I'm very proud to be part of a group that really does understand the consequences. Thank you. They do it. I just heard the snakes. But the truth is, we don't really understand what kind of an impact we have on our environment and our daily life's impact on what and who we are as an impact. And if you took a look at it, we produce about 5.5 pounds of trash every single day. Each of us do. Now, this is a number from San Diego, and unfortunately, it's about 1.2 pounds higher than the average Californian. But that's because we have roughly 500,000 visitors to our community on a monthly basis. So we're a little bit higher, and unfortunately, because of the tourists, they're not as respectful of their daily use either. So we are having to suffer the consequences of their introduction to our waste stream. But you have to ask, where does this stuff go? And what happens to it when we don't take care of it? There are no cities in the state of California whose rain and storm drains are treated before they get to the collection point, before they get into the ocean. Do you know that? Yeah, pretty amazing. So all the stuff that you see on the street that ends up in the storm drain eventually ends up in a spillway, and that spillway eventually ends up into a watershed, which eventually ends up into our oceans. There is very little, if none, depending on where you're coming from, treatment of that materials to our water's coast. So we spend a ton of time in what's called the watershed environment, the creek and bay, so that we educate and create an environment where people understand that by throwing it on the street today potentially could be pollution of our oceans tomorrow. When I was the base commanding officer at Naval Base, my first night was the worst night of my entire 3-year tour. We were in the midst of a 5-day, 100-year event of rain. And the Naval Base is right on the bay of San Diego, and 5 days of downpour resulted in a mass of water that came down the two creeks, Chulas and Paletta Creek, which cover the north and the south boundaries of the naval station. And the base command duty officer called me and said, "Sir, you have no idea what we're dealing with in Chulas Creek." He said, "You need to come like ASAP, so as soon as possible." So I get out there and I literally go to this boom, which was established at the end of the creek, not to protect what was coming out of the creek, but was to protect the potential for an oil spill at my small boat facility from going up into the protected estuary. So I want to make absolutely certain that if something happened in the repair of a boat, that contaminant didn't go up inside the protected estuary. But on the other side of that boom was 80 tons of trash and debris that had washed down in from Chulas Creek, that had the boom not been there, would have ended up in San Diego Bay. and that is one of 6 watersheds into the San Diego Bay. If you go to LA and you take a look around, you have as many, if not more, watersheds, waterfalls, and outpours to your collection system, which eventually ends up on your coast. So the importance of cleaning this stuff up becomes that much more important because there is no safe place for you to do this. It really rests with us. And I tell people this often. If you want to know the answer to this, the solution to the problem, look at the face staring you in the mirror. Government will not solve this problem. Regulation will help, but you will solve it. And only you can solve it. Because it is we who made it. It is our time to educate and train the youth of tomorrow so that they break the bad behaviors of our learning and change their methodology so that the things that they do tomorrow will perpetuate life and ability for this planet to survive. So we have to understand what's happening. And I'm sure many of you have heard about the gyres of the Pacific and the mess and the traffic and all the rest of that stuff that's out there. I'm telling you, I'm a meteorologist and oceanographer by degree, a climatologist by study. I have a master's in business and a master's in international relations and strategic studies. I have spent a very large part of my life studying this stuff and have had the opportunity, and I would say as a flag officer, to be introduced to a number of individuals who are really in this. This is a crisis of untold proportions. The gyres of the Pacific Northwest are 2 times the size of the state of Texas. And everybody thinks this is just garbage sitting on top of the surface so that you can just, it's not, folks. It is a thick and dense microplastic environment that extends in excess of 300 meters below the surface. That's 900 feet for those who can't do quick conversion. So roughly 900 plus feet of this microplastic mess, and this is only one of 7 gyres in our world's oceans. So every one of these gyres are created by current, and that current from upwell to downwell creates this kind of swirling pattern. And the lower portions of our oceans are driven by those currents. But unfortunately, very much like a bathtub, and I use this as an example, so you pull the plug on a bathtub and you see the current that starts to form around the drain. And in this case, we use temperature, not drain. So the temperature of the ocean is what's holding this together. And what it does is it forms that little cyclone piece where all the little soap suds end up before it goes down the drain. Well, that's what's happening in our oceans. So all the plastics that we're dumping into our oceans are ending up in these gyres. And they're massive. They are massive. If we have time, I'm going to show you a couple of videos of what's out there. But the strange and amazing part of this is that scientists now forecast that in 6 years from now, just 6 years from today, if we do not do something serious to prevent this from happening, the amount of trash in our oceans will outweigh the amount of fish. Yeah, what the heck? Our oceans are incredibly sick, and we are not understanding the impacts that we are having on the most dynamic aspect of the globe that separates our planet from every single planet in our universe: water. It's it, water. We do not understand that we have taken advantage of that, even in the process, because the sequestration of our Earth's water system actually pulls more carbon out of the air, 80 times more carbon than all of Terra combined. 80 times. But there are portions of our oceans, because we have not been more understanding of our impacts, that are saturated. Okay, so anybody taking chemistry? Well, it doesn't even have to take chemistry. You just have to understand that 100% is 100%. You can't add anything more to it when you reach 100%. There's no such thing as 103% of a volume. It's 100%. Anything over that, it's overflowing. Okay? Because of the amount of carbon that is being naturally sequestered in our oceans, it is absorbing 6 to 8 times what it was intended to absorb because we continuously flood it in a different fashion. And we are creating an environment with our waste which makes it even more damaging. Because the microplastics that are now being formed as a result of our waste are forming in a fashion that becomes single molecule in structure. And the importance of understanding plastic is that it is a man-made chemical compound. No matter what we do to that compound, unless we break it apart by molecule, it will always remain in that state in perpetuity, meaning forever. It has a persistence greater than nuclear material because it has a half-life. In over 100,000 years, a gram of uranium will be able to be put in your hand because it will have virtually no more effect than the background. But a BPA, a carbon molecule that is being created in the plastic environment, is forever known and has been for years a carcinogen. Cancer-forming agent, known by virtually every health organization for the better part of the last 20 years, to be directly linked to cancer. When that microplastic breaks down into our ocean, it becomes a molecular, single molecule that is then absorbed at the lowest levels of the food chain. Becomes part of every aspect of our environment. 99.2% of the necropsies conducted by the World Wildlife Federation in the past 5 years have shown signs of plastic or plastic contaminant either in their digestive system or their cellular structure. 99.2%. So not only is it affecting the food stream, it is already affecting the animal population of our Earth and having serious consequences on what they are and how they are to survive. This is a big part of it because that's what happens to all the mess that we allow to get out there. So we have these huge pieces, and the debris is amazing. Did you know that sea turtles are actually dying more because of plastic waste than any other portion of mankind? And we keep saying, well, it's getting caught in nets and everything else. No, you see, a clear plastic bag in the ocean looks like jellyfish. And it is the principal food source for green turtle. It ingests the plastic, and like every other animal on the face of the earth, it has a very difficult time of regurgitating what isn't part of the food chain. Animals have a process that they use to digest even the most caustic materials. So it can't get rid of it, but it also can't break it down. There is no way to break it down in our system. So that poor sea turtle dies because it's ingested a plastic bag that you were too lazy to throw out and dispose of properly, or better yet, not use. So the sea turtles, the sea urchins, the likes, the nets, and I can show you a video of how important this is. There are some estimated 80,000 tons of fishing debris throughout the world's ocean. Much of it nets and other refuse that's left out there when it gets caught up or hung up. And it is having a devastating effect. And you'll see every once in a while in the news, there'll be a clip of somebody rescuing a sea lion who's entangled or something else. But we do. And we need to understand, where does this all go? And even the stuff that we do dispose of, where does it go? Now, this is for San Diego, but we only have 3 landfills in San Diego. I tried to find how many there are in LA County, but I couldn't find the total number. I do know that you have 6 different waste haulers, and I don't know that each of them have their own landfill. But the truth of the matter is, every single landfill in the state of California is impacted, which is why legislation is now driving the reductions in so many different places, because once the landfill is full, there's no place to put it. We're looking in San Diego County and say, oh my God, what are we going to do in 2030? And oh, by the way, the only reason why the landfill in San Diego has a 2030 timeline is because when I was the regional commander, I completely redid the recycling and waste management effort in Navy and diverted 70% of our trash from the landfill. 70%. And I represent 4 fairly large cities. So you can make a difference and have an impact, but there's no place for you to put this thing when it's all said and done. When that landfill is full, where are you going to put it? What do we do with it? Well, we got to figure out what that looks like, and you got to understand what your trash is. What is what? Did you know that we throw out 40% of everything that we grow in this country? Isn't that sad? What did I say? 1 in 6 children go to bed hungry. 3 out of 5 families are food dependent on some source of help and income. But yet we throw out 40% of everything we grow. That's equivalent, folks, to going to the grocery store, buying 4 bags of groceries, and leaving 1 of the 4 on the curb for the garbage man to pick up. And we say we don't have enough money to make ends meet. No, what we have is a society that's wasteful and unrecognizing of the true consequences of your day-to-day actions when it comes to waste and use. It's part of the 3 R's. Okay? Understand what this all is. Understand how you can reduce and help to eliminate some of those aspects of trash. Because every single one of them are part of your daily life, no matter who you are or where you are. And when we say zero waste, I just want everybody to know the term zero waste is kind of misleading a little bit because so many people, they attach themselves to a single word, zero. That's not zero. There is no way that anything living on the face of the earth can have zero waste. Even animals have waste. The idea is that the zero waste is for everything that you can not repurpose, recycle, or reuse. So we want to make absolutely certain that you are doing that. One of the ways I diverted 70% of my stuff from the bases is I said, you're not allowed to throw anything out unless you've used it twice. And then you have to tell the admiral why it's going to be thrown in the landfill. And believe it or not, folks, I made you, the taxpayer, $18.4 million in just 2 years. Yeah, you can't use it for anything else except recycling, but it's important to understand there's value here because I didn't manage it as waste. I became a commodity manager. And I began looking at the probability that each of these aspects, the 3 R's, actually do have value. So for almost 2 years, we did not have 1 desk purchased in the entire region. People had an excess desk, people had a need, we connected, boom, done. We created a reuse and repair facility. Your desk needs an arm, or your chair needs an arm, or it needs a new spring. That one has an arm and a spring, and here it goes, here's your chair. But the taxpayer didn't pay for a new one. And it didn't go to DRMO so it could go someplace else. It's how do you go about that process in your daily life? I told folks over here this morning that every single American, on an average, owns 33,000 things. Every single American owns roughly 33,000 things. Wow. If you were to start today to touch one of those. 16 years from now, you'll get there. The fastest growing real estate entity in the United States, storage facilities. And the bigger cities get and the smaller the apartment complexes and townhouses and things get, the bigger the storage shed. But yet more than 80% of that stuff is never touched once it goes into storage. You pay in perpetuity for items that you think somehow, before you put yourself in that final position, you will use. Not the case, folks. And think of how many people don't have a jacket or a sweater or a pair of shoes or pants. Think about people who are struggling every day, who could use the couch that's been in your storage facility for the last 5 years, thinking somehow you're going to use it. And then how greedy we become in the process to think that a consignment is a process by which we benefit. I'm sorry, and I don't mean, again, to get religious, but that's not how he taught me to grow up. It is not through my profit, it is through my generosity that we survive. And that's not what we're doing. Because all the decisions that I've just told you are based on our capitalistic approach towards how we live and what's necessary for us to be successful. Every bit of this is all about capitalism and the process that we use on a daily basis. And again, the decision lies in the mirror. The opportunity to change and create literally does lie in the mirror. It can be. You need to understand where it goes. And you need to also understand that before you even get to this piece, that what you're using, you actually need. And that there is an opportunity for you to use something else that can be reused or recycled through a process that provides a virtually zero footprint. That's what zero waste means. You get to the point in which everything that you use in your daily life that you have to has already gone through the 3 R's at least twice, sometimes hundreds of times. I have not used a plastic bag in my home in more than 3 years. And if I do use a plastic bag and it's part of my plastic bag cycle, it's being used for the same thing for the 3 years that I've been using it. I put the same type of bread in the same Ziploc plastic bag for the last 3 years. I think just last year I actually had to change it to one because the Ziploc broke. But it just isn't a disposable piece. When you pack up your lunch in the morning, do you bring it in the reusable containers or do you bring it in plastic bags? Are you conscious of how you buy things so that you are in bulk, being able to bring and come so that you, what we call, people say, pack in, pack out. Wash it, pack it in. That's what this means. Change the lifestyle so that those are no longer necessary. So we're not buying single boxes of raisins or all those little things that just make life so convenient. We can't be convenient. Because regardless of how much you would love to think so, it took the better part of 20 years to go to the moon and we haven't been back since. There is no recourse for us. There is not another planet for us to jump to when this one's all done. But we also need to understand what our responsibility is to make sure that as we go through this process, we're doing what's right. So for example, the container that's your food's in, is it recyclable? Yes. No.
What?
It is compostable.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna break down.
It is not recyclable.
It's gonna break down.
There is a huge difference, and it is the responsibility of each individual to understand what that really means. So in Europe, there are actually 5 bins. There are not 2 or 3 for convenience, the greenery and the likes. There are 5 bins because each of those particular commodities need to be segregated from the waste stream in particular so that they can be handled right. And we are all complaining that, God, waste management is getting so expensive. It's almost as expensive as property taxes. Well, look at the person in the mirror. The reason why it's expensive is because you won't take the time to separate it properly. So if you won't take the time, then understand the consequences are in your wallet. And unfortunately, our environment. Because when it doesn't get recycled properly, it ends up in the waste. And it will end up in the dump. Even though it can be reused or whatever else, you have contaminated the waste stream so that the process that's intended for its reuse cannot be done economically. So we have to be smart on what's there. You need to be aggressive in finding solutions so that you engage partners. So that when you come and you do granola bars, for example, that you have a partnership with TerraCycle. And you create a bin somewhere where your individuals who do that, because in some cases FDA only allows certain packaging, but you provide some place for your employee to deposit that so it can be taken care of properly. And when you get 50 pounds of the material, TerraCycle sends you a box and boom, it's gone. And they recycle it. And guess what? They make clothing out of it, they make shoes out of it, they make boxes out of it, they do all kinds of stuff. So it's important that you get there and you understand what can and can't be, what's trash and what isn't trash. Hazardous waste is a big deal. Lithium batteries and all the rest of that stuff. Hey, guess what? All of that stuff is really hazardous contaminant, and when it breaks down in the environment, it is causing some of the problems in our watersheds, in our landfills, and in our oceans. Those materials, again, do not break down. They only contaminate. They are not natural. And we, man, collect them, different from the normal environment, so that we concentrate that contaminant in a fashion that the rest of the planet was never intended to have to deal with. The normal system doesn't know how to do that. Okay? And know what goes where. What's green, what's regular. How many of you compost? Good. Do you seriously compost, or are you... Okay, good. So you can teach everybody else how to do it. Have you invited your composting for the rest of your friends in the room here? I have a 55-gallon composter, vermicomposter, in which my 5 neighbors contribute, because my worms roughly go through a half a pound of green a day. But it's teaching my 5 neighbors to make sure that they do it right, so I don't have to separate it again. But we also have a regular composter. I have a 10-story worm bin. And it lives in my garage. If you know how to do it properly, it doesn't smell. If you learn to do it properly, you never again will have to go to the hardware store and buy potting soil. Because you make your own. I don't buy fertilizer, I compost. It's not hard. And everyone can learn to do it. You can even do it on site. It's legal. So you really do. I mean, there's opportunities for you to do backyard educations. There's opportunities for you to be able to engage in projects that bring this group together through some kind of event. But at the same time, you're learning. And you can translate that learning to your friends. You can translate that learning to the next generation so that they too understand how they can change their lifestyles so that these become realities. These opportunities are here. The one thing that is a very difficult thing to deal with is C&D, and the only construction and demolition. And the only thing I will tell you about construction and demolition, even though you guys are facility managers, it's very important that you do this properly. But more importantly, my message to everyone else is when you see the illegal dumping of this stuff, do not be afraid to report it. Do not be afraid to report it. And please be aggressive in making sure that when you see something, you do report it. Because in most cases, it's not just drywall and 2x4s. The individuals who are doing this deposit their paint cans, their batteries, literally everything else that is part of a construction project ends up in the cul-de-sac next to the trail that their kids and our dogs are walking in. So be careful, because this is a growing problem in the state of California. And I'm not saying a small but a huge growing problem in the state of California. So what do? Well, start thinking about what can I do to adjust? What are the things that I can do in my life that are different? How many of you still use plastic toothbrushes? Yeah, everybody does, come on. Well, there are new systems. There are new toothbrushes that are actually made with bamboo, or the head is transferable so that you will use the same handle for a lifetime, but you will actually change the brush. And the brushes are made from natural fibers, and you dispose of the brush accordingly. But these are the types of things that we need to start thinking about when we change our behaviors. What are the things that we have on a daily basis that we could literally live with for 10 plus years? And what are the opportunities that we have in our lifetime that then say, okay, when this is all said and done, I don't have any waste. I bring my garbage can to the curb every third week. Yeah, how about that? The only thing that I bring to the curb every week is my recycle bin, because all of my recycled materials are separated properly and everything else goes into the rest. But we've changed our lifestyle so that many of this stuff is done. We don't have to do these. Think, how many of you are still asking for that 10-cent bag? No, you just get handed it. But believe it or not, California passed the law. It took 6.5 years to get them to finally do so. And oh, by the way, it was fought by virtually every single entity that distributes plastic bags. So the lobbying effort in Sacramento was probably the biggest since the PEV and the PV rebate program. But the reason why was because they thought this would just be a drain on their ability to do anything. Well, little did they know that if you ask a teller today how many people that come through the line actually ask you for a bag. Guess what we found out? 7 out of 10. And even though individuals will come in with a bag, they won't bring enough bags to bring their stuff out, and they still buy it. But here's the kicker, folks. Again, not understanding what you've done, they love it now. Because the bag they used to give you cost them less than half a cent. The bag they're now giving you, which is 5 times worse to the environment, and people are not using that bag as it was intended for reuse, they are making 9.5 cents on every bag that they give you, and you are doing a worse job of contaminating my environment because that bag takes 10 times longer to disappear. And 70% of all recyclable plastics do not make it to the recycle facility. 70%. We preserve less than 30%. So adjust your habits. Look at the things that you can do on a daily basis. Make sure that you're really becoming. Get out there and teach. Go to workshops and teach. Engage your Boy Scouts, your Girl Scouts, your YMCAs, your classrooms. Show them how they can do it differently, but more importantly, teach them why it's important. And we've actually found more success in the K through 5 than we have with the people who have already ingrained in the procedures of, no, mom and dad got here through that process, got to be good for me. Wrong answer, folks. We need to reverse that trend like real fast, because we don't have 3 generations to wait to make this happen. It has to be faster. We need to do more zero-waste community workshops in our workplace, in our communities, in our home environments, in our neighborhoods. We need to understand what it's going to take. How many of you here drive a pickup truck? Come on. Do you cover your bed all the time? Nearly 75% of all the waste found on our roads and streets come from the beds of trucks, pickup trucks, and commercial vehicles. When's the last time you saw somebody throw something out of the back window of their car? Probably not a whole lot. And when's the last time you saw somebody throw a mattress out of the back window of their car? Or 6 feet of plastic wrap, or 20 feet of insulation, or a door, or a cone, a ladder. It comes out of the back of these vehicles, and it's not being done intentionally. I guarantee you, walk around this parking lot and look in the open beds of trucks, and you will find debris in there. And what they don't understand is the physics associated with a moving object impacts the bed of a truck. The vortex created in the same fashion as the ocean, the vortex created when you turn and swerve and shift lanes is a suction cup and pulls that material out of the truck and into the road. So it's not being done intentionally, it's just being done through ignorance of the impact that you have on our environment. And what can you do to change how that goes? You have two options. If you can't be clean enough to empty your bed, then cover it. It's just that simple. So again, Coastal Cleanup Day was our biggest event this past year. We had 108 sites, a little over 7,000 volunteers throughout the county. We picked up 74.2 tons of trash and debris in just 3 hours. So you see it's bigger. We had 39 sites of reclamation, so we do species invasive quality, and we also do community projects. So we paint park benches and we clean up things Keep America Beautiful do. But we do 4 of these a year. So this is why, from a Keep America Beautiful perspective, we even had divers and kayaks and the whole 9 yards out in the bay, cleaning up and making sure that everything that was out there is part of this process. And we do local cleanups. We do more than 800 cleanups a year, 34,000 volunteers. Last year, we picked up 350,000 pounds of debris, 150 tons. So, what do you take away? Get involved. Become informed. Change your life habits so that they're more productive and more understanding of the environment, so that you are more respectful in your day-to-day practices, and you encourage others around you to do the same thing, because again, while we change, we need everyone to change. We need everyone to be able to get to this point.